in work poverty.
The spokesperson, Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Ms Rees. It's a pleasure to see a friend of the worker in the chair. And can I start off by thanking my good friend, or honourable comrade, as we call each other, the Honourable Member for Easington, for an excellent speech which kicked off. And certainly I think the number of contributions, the exception perhaps of one, was very impressive indeed in this debate. But there are, I think, a number of points that I want to make. Firstly, in-work poverty and inadequate living standards remain the norm for far too many people in these islands, that we urge the UK Government to look at the minimum wage rates in the country, that it does need to amend not only the definition of a worker, but that it needs to strengthen and needs to go further and strengthen protection. So the UK has the highest levels of in-work poverty this century, and that disproportionately impacts groups facing high living costs, such as lone parents, a majority of whom, of course, are women, disabled people and people with caring responsibilities. And the report that was mentioned earlier by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation shows that around two-thirds, it's actually 68% of working-age adults in poverty in the UK live in a household where at least one adult is in work. That figure has never been higher, and since these records were kept from 1996. So we now have the highest levels of in-work poverty. And for too many people, low-paid jobs offer no opportunities to progress to better work and better wages. For far too many people, they're in insecure work with unpredictable hours and incomes. And I think that is something that I do want to touch on. That's, of course, in stark contrast to the situation in Scotland. Where I'll give way to my friend, yes, of course.
I think he's making some excellent points, but I wonder what impact it's going to have in constituencies like mine and perhaps 60 others, where the government have decided to close the job centres, including the Seaham Job Centre in my constituency. What impact is that going to have on alleviating in-work poverty and encouraging people who are out of work into paid employment?
Well, it's going to increase in-work poverty because, as my good friend will know, the government closed or tried to close half the job centres in the city of Glasgow. And what's happening there is that people are having to spend more money and have to go further to get to a job centre so they can see if they can get better work. I do want to touch on firstly, because we have a minister from the Department of Work and Pensions in front of us, there are a number of people claiming universal credit who are in work. And we have the situation where, and it was the minister responded to a written question, that half of DWP claimants have their universal credit claims deducted. That, I would argue, Ms Rees, is a poverty tax, where in some cases, £60 a month is taking away from someone's universal credit claim. Now, universal credit is supposed to be a subsistence benefit that's there and paid at a rate where people can live on. And if you take £60 a month away from them, people are having to choose between either to eat or even to heat or even both. And that really needs to end. And the issue of advances need to be replaced by an upfront grant or a starter payment, as we argued in the Department of Work and Pensions Select Committee. And the recovery of tax credits needs to be at a lower level. And I would say debts of more than 6 years should be written off entirely. There's a number of lawyers in the room, and they know if I try to sue them for a debt that was over 6 years old, a sheriff and certainly a Scottish court would write that off and would absolve that particular debt. I also want the Minister perhaps to respond to a point I made earlier in my intervention with my honourable friend from Easington, and that is the advertisements for jobs in the Department of Work and Pensions' own websites, which found that 31% of full-time jobs and 50% of part-time jobs were under the real living wage of £9.90 an hour. 20% were advertised under the national minimum wage of £9.50, and I'll give 3 examples. Burger King advertised at £6 an hour. Pizza Express paying £6.56 an hour. Farm Foods paying £6.66 an hour. None of these adverts clarified age wage rates. And all of these companies, as I understand it, have made substantial profits in the last year or two. So increasing these wage rates and asking them to pay more certainly wouldn't harm these businesses all that much. These are multinational companies I'm mentioning here. And I would like to know, Minister, what the Department of Work and Pensions is going to do about these adverts, or are they going to refer themselves to the National Minimum Wage Compliance Unit, which, of course, there are a number of vacancies, and perhaps we can advertise those jobs in the Department of Work and Pensions website, because that has to happen. And I do want to touch on what my honourable friend from Glasgow East said about age discrimination in national minimum wage rates. I think he's absolutely right. There is this nonsensical argument that somehow young people are not active participants in the labour market. Well, if you're in Burger King, as I mentioned earlier, and you've got a 17-year-old next to a 37-year-old, and they're both flipping hamburgers, they're both equal participants in the labour market, and they should be both be paid the same rate for doing the same work. That's what I call equal pay, and I think that, certainly the equal pay legislation was always encouraging people to get the same rate for the same job and the same work. And what would happen, actually, if you increase wages, is that people spend money. We see this false argument made when it comes to public sector pay as well, is that somehow that's money getting taken out of the economy. Well, that's not how it works. People don't, when they get an increase in wages, put it in a shoebox and hide it under their bed, Ms Rees. What they do is they go and spend it in the economy. They can then afford things that they weren't able to afford before. And so they'll spend more on food and other items. I do think that, touching on the contribution from the Honourable Member for Middlesbrough, and I certainly support his bill, and I know that he supports mine, which is the Workers' Rights and Definitions Bill, there really needs to be a definition of a worker so that we can strengthen workers' rights. The Government has been sitting for 4 years on the Taylor report, which looked to address some of these issues, and we were told in the last Queen's speech it's no longer a priority for the Government. Well, I think that's a scandalous answer. There needs to be a real look at the protection for a worker, and also looking to eliminate zero-hour contracts and unfair contracts. This situation where employers are allowed to text 4 people and say the first one here gets the shift has really got to end. It's got to end where someone would have to phone a taxi or run out the house and get there first and spend money to do that, and then find themselves the runner-up and get nothing. Is completely and utterly scandalous. And that, of course, is included in the bill that I have put forward, Ms Rees, because we really need to address that issue. And we really need to look at flexible working and strengthening parental, neonatal and miscarriage leave for workers as well, Ms Rees, because it's clear to me, and I'll give way. You want to give way, my friend? No? I'm sorry, I thought my honourable friend was wanted to give way. We really need to look at that. SNP MPs, Ms Rees, in closing, have consistently in this place looked to strengthen workers' rights and present bills for doing so. And I do want to commend the Bakers Union for its Right to Food campaign, and I'll be welcoming them in Glasgow, as they've identified Glasgow South West as one of the constituencies in which they want to do work. There is much that the Government needs to do to address in-work poverty before it gets even worse. Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson.